Thank you so much. And today's session is really about how do we change things. And Minister Bartlett is going to give us his view, a macro view and a micro view of what the future can be.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Jill. I think we've been talking a little bit about the impact of the pandemic on the global psyche, not just now of the medical world that has really been embraced in it and have led us. As a matter of fact, it's perhaps the first time in maybe a few centuries where all of us were literally totally at the behest of the medical fraternity. And governments had to cede to the direction of ministers of health and epidemiologists. And I think the World Health Organization had center stage in a manner it never did before. So it created that period where all of us were in what we call the sense of uncertainty. We knew nothing and we understood even less. And we relied heavily on science and data in a way that we never did before. The industry that suffered the most during this period is, of course, our industry, tourism. I had an experience where, having had growth levels in 2019, unprecedented in our own history, woke up one morning in March and found 0 visitors on my doorstep that had all the hotels closed. All the workers either furloughed or separated, and some with a sense of not knowing whether that separation is permanent or it would be temporary, and indeed, what period of temporariness would ensue. So what we had was an industry that had gone from being 10% of global GDP, of earning $7.8 trillion US dollars, of employing 400 million people, and representing 18 to 20% of the trade in services, to being a zero industry. And what all of that did was to create a new sense of how do we ever get out of this, or can we get out of it? Anyway, man, in his wonderful sense of being able to innovate and to pivot and to adapt, displayed those characteristics again. And we were able to have mitigation and protocols and actions which we all followed carefully and well. And within 2 years, we are now in a period of what we call the anthropause, when we're active again, we're flying, we're moving. But what has happened as a result of that period of anthropause is a disruption, a whole disruption of both the social systems, the political systems, the economic systems, and even the environment, based on the fact that during that anthropause, the environment had a chance to refresh itself, as the planes were not flying, so there were no emissions up there. The ships were not sailing, so the fish got a chance to regenerate and breathe, you know. There was no hunting in the forest, so the animals in the wild got a chance to reproduce and grow. And a few things good happened. But also, production ceased, manufacturing ceased. And there was a logistics nightmare because there was no movement now of goods and services. and with the result, of course, of a recovery that has now come that is beset with a number of disruptions. And so the supply chain disruption is the number one we speak about. And within that frame, it's a human capital disruption. So Rajan made the point. The hotels are open, but the workers are not back. The planes are trying to fly, but the pilots are not back. The stewardesses and stewards are not back. And we could go on and on and on, because the nature of the recovery now is being hampered by this very fact that we need to bring back the workforce of tourism. And so one of the reasons that we are talking today is to try to examine why is it that the workers are not coming back. And perhaps we need then to look at ourselves and to look at the industry prior to COVID, up to 2019. What was the employment ecosystem that obtained? Did we provide security of tenure for our workers? Were our workers satisfied in their job space? Did they have social security? Did they have the capacity to experience mobility within their workspace? Did they have the capacity for portability within their workspace? When they left the work, did they go into a community that offered them a sense of relief, or did it enable more pain and difficulty? Did we provide housing facilities for them? Did they have access to Medicare? So these are some of the conditions that we look at as we now examine why is it that they're not coming back to us. But then we need to also examine another factor, the psychosocial impact of that period. The fact that tourism is driven hugely with a gender mix that favors our women. 60% of the workers of the tourism industry globally are women. So when you consider who the displaced were, it's our women who suffered. But they went home, and they went home to their children. And by nature, they nurture. And that sense of nurture created something else within them, and questioned the bond that perhaps existed between themselves and their children while they were at the hotels working. And whether this newfound missing link has anything to do with what will happen in terms of their attitude to going back to work. So all of these, once we begin to consider them, then we have to look at how to reimagine the tourism work environment. To reimagine it in terms of what are the new skill sets that may be required to enable the worker to come back to us. And who are they? What kind of job arrangements, what kind of labor market arrangements we now need to craft in order to be attractive again to the tourism worker. In Jamaica, and I give you this and leave you there, in Jamaica, we have looked at this because we have a 20% negative employment in tourism. So we begin to look at how is it that we have remunerated our workers. And it is true, the tourism worker prior to the pandemic were the lowest paid in the world. Our working conditions were the most difficult to maneuver because we had no tenure. We were all casual workers, low-skilled, low remunerated. And most importantly, we never professionalized the industry. So we never saw ourselves as being a career person in tourism. We saw tourism as a transit area where you pass through to become something else. You leave high school, you spend a few weeks in a tourism place as a playmaker or as a front desk operator or something on your way to becoming a lawyer, teacher, doctor, or something. So how do we now change that whole scenario and to professionalize the industry? So we established the Jamaica Center for Tourism Innovation, which became a pathway training and certification institute which allowed for workers who are competent on the job to be certified while on the job. And what that did was to give them an opportunity now for mobility, but also portability. The second was to look at our young people who were in high school and who never thought that tourism was a career path. But we went in now with a program of training and also to provide them with an associate degree in hospitality and customer service, so they can enter into the workforce with qualification, with stackable credentials. And finally, we looked at a plan for social security. And Jamaica established the first ever, and to date worldwide, comprehensive tourism workers' pension plan, legislated in Parliament, to ensure that every single person who works in the tourism industry, whether in hotels or attractions, transportation, or anywhere in the industry, you have an opportunity to be part of a pension plan with a contributory pension scheme of 3% for you and your employer, 3%, and it gives you an opportunity to retire in grace. So these are some of the conditions I believe that if we examine and look at, might create the sexiness that Rajan spoke about and enable us to have our workers coming back. And so perhaps a charter, and we spoke about that at a different way, a global charter on the whole matter of employment and the ecosystems around employment for tourism might be a discussion worth having at this time.
Okay, thank you, Minister. That's fantastic. Yes, we'll go for the panel. I think what we want to get out of today before I introduce the panel is really some of the deep learnings that and examples of what's been going on in tourism industry, but also look at the sort of the real paradigm shift. What are the things that we can actually innovate? And we're blessed with a great panel, Minister included, that actually shows people who are innovators, strategists, educators, enablers. And I think one of the things about today, I've probably had the best conversations offline about what we can do to change. So let me introduce, first of all, Secretary General of the Chamber of Commerce, Dragana Kokot. Yeah. I think I'll sit over here. And the next person is Anne Lotter, who is the Executive Director of GTTP. And Alexis Gardy, who is the CEO of Belambra Clubs in France. So welcome everyone. I think what we started with Mr. Bartlett was the context of what's gone on. But what I want out of today is really to understand what are the issues you're facing and what are you doing about those issues. So Dragana, you have an amazing role because you cover everything from economic, sustainable growth, you coordinate, you're involved in women's entrepreneurs and so much. But could you just tell us what you're going through in terms of, talent and what is happening?
Thank you, Jill. Hello to everybody. Is it working? Yep, okay. Well, yes, it's hard to say something new after the ministry said a lot about the issues that are challenging all of us, the whole industry, but not only the tourism and hospitality industry. It's a global issue and a global challenge for a world and for each industry, it seems. As you said, I work with all industry because the chamber is that kind of institution, and each sector, at least in my country, but I believe that the situation, and I know in communication with colleagues from other countries that the situation is very similar. So there is a construction sector, transport sector, metal processing, wood processing industry, etc., that are facing the same problem: lack of human resource, human capital, skilled workers, and workers in general. So what we are doing, we are focusing on attracting the young people to think about the tourism and hospitality as a future profession for them. So we started with a dual system of education in the school, in vocational and technical schools, creating or implementing the principle learning by doing. So what does it mean? It means that we are trying to attract young people first to enroll the schools, touristic schools, and then to have more practice in companies, so they can at the beginning become familiar with the industry, with the sector, and with each potential employer for them, the working conditions and everything. Also, we put attention on adult education, trying to, attract elder people, yes, not elder people, but
Baby boomers or returners to work? Yeah, returners to work.
Yes,
yeah, like sort of working
to
mothers,
think about to change their profession or to
okay.
professionalize in touristic and hospitality sector. Also, there is these are the so-called formal ways of education and new methods and programs that we are developing. But there is also a good, excellent examples that we are working with the USAID tourism project in Bosnia and Herzegovina. You probably already heard for yesterday and today what we are doing in Bosnia and Herzegovina related to tourism. But what we did in past year and during this year, we developed the new program that is called Pathway to Professionalism. So trying to implement the program in hotels and restaurants to train people already employed there, so they could become trainers for the new employees and employees. And it's in kitchen, in the housekeeping sector, waiters, all necessary.
So it's a dynamic learning.
It is dynamic learning, day-to-day learning, yes. But of course, certified at the end with recognition for the person who will go through that education, to feel appreciated and to feel that there is a chance to learn more and to upgrade the knowledge.
Okay, and get paid more, yes?
Yes, of course, that is the,
I think the idea. I'm just going to Alexis, because in a way, you've only been in the job for the last 18 months, so congratulations.
Perfect timing.
What would be interesting, you as an operator, you know, working throughout the season, you know, what are the issues you've faced with your staff, both in attracting them and retaining them?
I think the main issue is strengthening the attractivity of the industry, because after this crisis, as you described, Mr. Minister, really there is a challenge in being attractive again. So the main challenges are people less motivated, that left purely and simply the industry. I have a few examples in mind. People working with us for 25 years, you know, chef, it was really, really well rated, appreciated by the clients, and he just said, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to leave, and I'm going to work in the wood industry, in working from 8 to 5, from Monday to Friday, and that's off. And this is the challenge, because during this crisis, people also discovered a different way of living, a different rhythm, rediscover their weekends, nights, and families, which is fair enough. But they also consider, as you described, you attract senior people to reposition in tourism, but these people decide to go outside tourism as well. So this is one of the main challenge. Then the second challenge is really to bring back motivation to deliver quality in the industry, in the business. And it's very difficult when, you know, you can easily find a job because everyone is looking for employees. So you can decide, for example, as a seasonal worker, to work until the end of July, and on July 31st, tell your boss, I'm off, and say, okay, you really think I will not take any days in August? And then come back in August 15th and find another job next door, working again. So we also have to be very cautious, I think, in the next months, next years, to find new ways of dealing with this situation, because there is such a disbalance between offer and demand that today I would say the power is in the hands of our future employees, which is fair enough. And I think it's what you described earlier in discussion. It was the opposite 20 years ago.
Okay,
So
there used to be the most amazing thing about working in a hotel and hospitality, traveling the world. The other thing that I think is very interesting is looking at how, I was talking to Anne earlier, how the sort of Generation Zs have changed, because the attitude I have as a baby boom is very different to them. And I think Anne running a global charity, training 700,000, people a year, is very interesting. How are we adapting the market to suit these potential employees?
Yes, thank you, Jill. It is an interesting dichotomy that we have. So we're looking to develop a series of education programs which directly aimed at 16 to 19-year-olds. So trying to capture young people at a point where they're discussing where they're going with their career and engaging them in with the industry. We're also looking to educate the teachers, because I think it's as important that teachers have an interest in delivering that education. And it's an education that we are looking to be very interactive with. It's not just sitting in the classroom. So we're developing a range of programs which we deliver through our own education platform to our students to really get them to understand better the industry, because they have really very little knowledge when they come into the classroom about it, and how wide it is and how interesting it is and diverse. And I think it's about getting them on board, but it's also about understanding the values of Gen Z, because Gen Z, they're much more value driven.